As of now, and I'm going to light a virtual chalice with these words called "The Struggle Continues." The road that lies ahead of us is a long one, and the pace of progress will sometimes feel glacially slow. Never forget that glaciers over time can carve out grand canyons and great lakes. Moving tectonic plates can rise up mountains over millennia, or they can explode awe inspiring volcanoes in milliseconds. Our commitment to love and justice can do the same. So, as we've started to move into spring here in Pittsburgh, the days have started growing a little bit longer, especially since we just set the clocks ahead an hour and we've had a few beautiful sunny days like today was. And the earliest spring flowers are starting to emerge from the ground, and buds have just started to appear on some of our trees, which led me to think about the nature of trees and leaves. One of the most popular metaphors for a church is a tree. A tree has roots that have been here long before any of us came into being. In our case, our Unitarian Universalist roots can be traced back at least to the radical Reformation in the 16th century. And a tree, of course, has a trunk and branches, which in a church might be thought of as the buildings, the events, and the moments in the church's history when something substantial has been built or otherwise put in place to give it shape and direction. And we, you and I, are like leaves. We who are today doing the work of keeping this larger organism alive. And leaves, as you know, do a pretty amazing thing. They take light and water and carbon dioxide and they turn them into carbohydrates that nourish the entire tree, and oxygen, which pretty much most living creatures need to survive. And leaves accomplish this amazing feat through a process called photosynthesis, which comes from the Greek words meaning to put together with light. I love that metaphor for our work as members and friends of the church. We each, in our own way, nourish the church and the larger world by putting together with light the various elements and ingredients that we're given to work with. Now, the main difference between leaves and you and me is that we as people have choices. We can choose to attach ourselves to one particular tree or another or none at all. We can choose the extent to which we want to be involved with the other leaves on the tree or leaves from other trees entirely. We can choose how much light we're going to put together with other elements and pass on to the larger tree. Another difference is that leaves tend not to have some of the less desirable qualities of human beings. Leaves are not apathetic or greedy. Leaves are not, as far as I know, mean spirited or stingy. Leaves are not boastful. You never see a leaf at the end of the day doing an end zone victory dance saying, "Look at me." It might happen, but you don't tend to see it. Leaves do not struggle to see who will be the leaf at the top of the tree. They don't squabble over their place on the tree. Leaves don't hoard or accumulate wealth for themselves alone. Instead, leaves take in the sun and the rain and the carbon dioxide from the air, and they do this little magic trick, this photosynthetic miracle that enables them to produce nutrients that they pass on to the rest of the tree and oxygen that they pass on to all living things. Leaves share what they have without any conditions and without any thought. But as I said, we, unlike leaves, can make choices. Rebecca Parker, UU minister and one of our leading theologians, wrote, "Your gifts, whatever you discover them to be, can be used to bless or curse the world. The mind's power, the strength of the hands, the reaches of the heart, the gift of speaking, listening, imagining, seeing, waiting, any of these can serve to feed the hungry, bind up wounds, welcome the stranger, praise what is sacred, do the work of justice, or offer love. Any of these can draw down the prison door, hoard bread, abandon the poor, obscure what is holy, comply with injustice, or withhold love. You must answer this question: what will you do with your gifts? Choose to bless the world," says Rebecca Parker. This is the choice that we are given. We can, like leaves, choose to put together with light those gifts that we have been given to bless the world, or we can use those gifts in ways that do not bless the world and do not, in the long run, benefit even ourselves. What I'm circling around tonight is something to do with the concept of commitment, which is our Soul Matters theme for this month. As human beings, we are capable of choosing to live lives of commitment to those things that we believe are of ultimate value, things like compassion and love and justice. And the way we go about living those lives of commitment is to take things one at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time. Being committed to really big and important values and principles can seem overwhelming sometimes. There's so much that needs to be done, and there's only so much that each of us is capable of doing. But when we are truly committed to something, we understand that everything, every undertaking that is worth doing, is accomplished one step at a time. There's a song I'm going to try to sing for you this evening called Bird by Joe Crookston, and it was inspired by a quote from the writer Anne Lamott. Lamott said, speaking of a memory from her childhood, 30 years ago, my older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report written on birds that he'd had 3 months to write, and it was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin, and he was at the kitchen table, close to tears, surrounded by binder paper and pencils and unopened books about birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put his arm around my brother's shoulder, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy. Just take it bird by bird." I can think of no better words of wisdom for all of us today. Just take it bird by bird. Trouble isn't easy, trouble brings doubt. Fear comes in and the joy goes out. How are we gonna make it? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna make it when trouble comes through? We'll take it bird by bird, a little at a time. Take it bird by bird and stone by stone, a little at a time. Take it stone by stone. Change isn't easy, change is hard. Fear comes in and it can tear you apart. a time, take it stone by stone. Dreams aren't easy, dreams can get lost. Fear comes in and the dream gets tossed. How are we gonna make it? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna make this dream come true? We'll take it bird by bird, little at a time. Take it bird by bird and stone by stone. Little at a time, take it stone by stone. A little at a time, take it stone by stone. Taking it stone by stone will eventually get us where we want to go, as much as we may wish for some kind of superpower that would get us there more quickly. We must start where we are with what we have. One of my favorite stories is about a man who just hated his job. He was a stonemason and he had to work all day long for just a miserable salary. What an awful way to live, he thought to himself. If only I could be rich and just sit around all day long. His wish grew so intense that in the end it came true. The stonemason heard a voice saying, "You are what you want to be." And so he became rich and could immediately have all the things that he thought he wanted: a beautiful house, delicious food, great entertainment. He was happy until one day he saw a king passing by with his procession, and the man thought, "He's more powerful than I am. How I would like to be in his shoes." Once again, he heard the voice, "You are what you want to be," and as if by magic, he became a king. What a thrill! What power! Everyone obeyed him and all feared him. He was happy for a while, but again, it didn't last. Bit by bit, a little wicked dissatisfaction took hold of him. "I want more," he thought. He kept thinking, "I want, I want, I want." He saw the sun in the sky and thought, "The sun is even more powerful than I am. I want to be the sun." And so he became the sun, big, strong, and bright. He ruled the earth and sky. Nothing could exist without him. What happiness and what importance he felt. But then he noticed that beneath him, the clouds prevented him from seeing the landscape of earth below. The clouds were light and could move around easily instead of being stuck where the sun was in the sky. They could take an infinite variety of forms, and at sunset, they flushed with the most striking colors. They had no cares and were free. How enviable, he thought. Well, his envy, of course, didn't last long. Once more, he heard the voice saying, "You are what you want to be," and at once he was a cloud. It was so pleasant to be suspended in the air, mobile and fluffy. He enjoyed taking different shapes, sometimes thick and opaque, sometimes rich and white, sometimes as fine as embroidery. But sooner or later, the cloud condensed into raindrops and fell and struck a rock of solid granite. The rock had been there for millennia, hard and solid, and now the little drops of water burst on the granite and flowed onto the earth, where they were absorbed to disappear forever. How wonderful to be a rock, he thought, and instantly he became a rock. For some time, he enjoyed his life as a rock. At last, he thought he'd found stability. Now he felt secure. After all, he thought, it is security and solidity I've always been seeking, and no one is going to move me from here. Raindrops struck the rock and trickled down the sides, and it felt like a pleasant massage, a gift. The sun caressed and warmed him with its rays. How beautiful. He felt that he had attained completeness. Well, not yet. One day he saw a figure approaching on the horizon. It was a man slightly bent over with a large hammer, a stonemason who began striking the hammer against him. Worse than pain, he felt dismay. The stonemason was even stronger than he and could decide his destiny. How I wish I could be a stonemason, he thought. Thus he became a stonemason once again. After being everything he had wanted to be, he became again what he had always been. But this time, he was happy. Cutting stone became an art for him. The sound of the hammer was like music to his ears, and the fatigue at the end of the day brought on the satisfaction of a job well done. And that night, he had a wonderful vision of the cathedral stones that he was helping to build. It was a magnificent revelation, and he experienced a feeling that he knew would never leave him, a feeling of immense gratitude. Working with one another, starting right where we are, taking things stone by stone, we can and do make a difference for the better in the world. And this is the stuff that commitment is made of. I hope and pray that all of us might live lives of commitment, mixing together the gifts that we have been given with light and love to build the world that we dream about, stone by stone. Be it be so.